The wind began to howl across Puget Sound, Washington. Waves over 3 meters high crashed violently against the massive steel fish cages below. Hundreds of fishermen and engineers battled the storm as metal groaned and the sea raged. Then, a deep, thunderous blast echoed from beneath the surface. In an instant, 260,000 salmon, weighing thousands of tons, burst free from their enclosures, surging into the ocean like a living waterfall. It was a sight both breathtaking and terrifying. But what no one realized at that moment was that this single event would unleash a $1 billion ecological disaster, one that would haunt the Pacific Northwest for years to come. This wasn't a gift from the sea, it was an invasion. Because these salmon, they were never meant to live in the Pacific Ocean. Deep Discover, the Washington Salmon Invasion, how 260,000 escaped fish triggered $1 billion catastrophe. The 2017 Atlantic salmon escape from net pen facilities in Washington state represents one of the most significant aquaculture failures in North American history. Understanding this incident requires examining the technology and economics of salmon farming, the biological and ecological consequences of species introductions, and the complex regulatory and environmental questions surrounding marine aquaculture operations in Pacific Northwest waters. On August 19, 2017, a net pen facility operated by Cook Aquaculture near Cypress Island in Puget Sound experienced catastrophic structural failure. The facility, consisting of large underwater cages designed to contain hundreds of thousands of Atlantic salmon being raised for commercial harvest, collapsed during a period of high winds and strong tidal currents. The failure released approximately 260,000 Atlantic salmon, a non-native species in Pacific waters, into the marine environment. Atlantic salmon farming in Pacific Northwest waters had been controversial since its inception decades earlier. The industry argued that salmon farming provided economic benefits to coastal communities, created employment, and produced protein efficiently. Critics contended that farming non-native species in open water net pens created unacceptable risks to wild salmon populations already stressed by habitat loss, overfishing, hydroelectric dams, and climate change. The net pen technology itself involves large cage structures anchored in marine waters, typically in protected bays or inlets with good water circulation. These cages can be substantial. Individual pens might measure 30 to 50 meters in circumference and extend 10 to 20 meters deep, containing tens of thousands of fish. Multiple pens are typically grouped into arrays at a single site, creating facilities that can hold hundreds of thousands of salmon at various life stages. The fish are initially raised in land-based hatcheries through their early life stages, then transferred to net pens for grow-out to harvest size. The pens provide containment while allowing water exchange with the surrounding marine environment, which serves multiple functions including oxygen supply, waste removal, and temperature regulation. This design reduces infrastructure and operating costs compared to land-based closed systems, making net pen aquaculture economically attractive despite environmental concerns. However, the technology has inherent vulnerabilities. The structures must withstand substantial forces from waves, currents, and storms while remaining in place through anchoring systems. The netting must resist biofouling, maintain structural integrity despite constant immersion, and contain fish that actively swim and test barriers. Maintenance requires constant vigilance because any failure can release entire populations. The Cypress Island facility failure occurred during conditions that combined multiple stress factors. Weather conditions produced higher than normal winds and waves. Tidal currents were strong due to astronomical factors. The structural components, particularly the anchoring and mooring systems, proved inadequate to withstand the combined forces. Whether the failure resulted from design deficiencies, inadequate maintenance, or simply forces exceeding design specifications became subject of investigation and litigation. The immediate consequence was the release of approximately 260,000 Atlantic salmon into Puget Sound. These fish, raised in captivity and conditioned to commercial feed, suddenly found themselves in open water. Their behavior and survival would depend on their ability to adapt to natural conditions, finding food, avoiding predators, and navigating unfamiliar environments. Atlantic salmon are not native to the Pacific Ocean. They evolved in Atlantic Ocean watersheds, with distinct populations in North America and Europe. Pacific waters contain 5 native salmon species: Chinook, coho, chum, sockeye, and pink, plus steelhead trout. These species evolved in Pacific environments and occupy specific ecological niches. The introduction of a non-native salmon species raised multiple biological and ecological concerns. The first concern involved direct competition for resources. Escaped Atlantic salmon would compete with native salmon for food, particularly in nearshore and estuarine environments where juvenile native salmon rear before migrating to sea. If Atlantic salmon successfully established feeding territories, they could displace native fish or reduce food availability, affecting native salmon growth and survival. The second concern involved disease and parasite transmission. Farmed salmon, maintained at high densities that facilitate pathogen transmission, often carry diseases and parasites at higher levels than wild fish. Sea lice, parasitic copepods that attach to salmon, are particularly problematic in salmon farming. Escaped farmed salmon could transmit these parasites to native salmon populations, with potentially serious consequences for fish already stressed by other factors. The third and potentially most serious concern involved genetic introgression. If escaped Atlantic salmon successfully spawned with native Pacific salmon species, hybridization could introduce foreign genes into wild populations. While Atlantic and Pacific salmon are distinct species, they're closely related enough that hybridization might be possible. Even if direct hybridization didn't occur, competition for spawning habitat could disrupt native salmon reproduction. The possibility of Atlantic salmon establishing self-sustaining populations in Pacific waters was considered unlikely, but not impossible. Atlantic salmon had been intentionally introduced to various locations globally with mixed results. In most cases, they failed to establish because conditions differed from their native range, or they couldn't compete with native species. However, some introductions succeeded, demonstrating that under appropriate conditions, Atlantic salmon could colonize new environments. The response to the escape involved multiple agencies and stakeholder groups. Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife mobilized to coordinate recovery efforts. Commercial and recreational fishermen were encouraged to catch escaped salmon, with regulations temporarily modified to facilitate this. Tribal nations, whose treaty rights and cultural practices depend on salmon, engaged in recovery and monitoring efforts. Environmental organizations demanded accountability and called for ending Atlantic salmon farming in Washington waters. The recovery efforts faced substantial challenges. Puget Sound covers approximately 1,000 square miles of water, with complex bathymetry, strong currents, and connections to the broader Pacific Ocean. Locating and capturing fish dispersed across this area was extraordinarily difficult. Some escaped salmon were caught in the immediate vicinity of the failed facility, but many dispersed rapidly. Within days, escaped Atlantic salmon were reported throughout Puget Sound and into waters off British Columbia. The effectiveness of recovery efforts remains uncertain. Official estimates suggested that perhaps 20,000 to 30,000 escaped salmon were recovered through directed fishing efforts, though exact numbers are difficult to verify. This would mean the vast majority, perhaps 85 to 90% of the escaped population, remained at large. The fate of these fish became subject of ongoing monitoring and research. Biological surveys in the years following the escape sought to determine whether escaped Atlantic salmon survived, where they went, and whether they successfully reproduced. These surveys involved sampling in rivers where salmon might attempt to spawn, genetic analysis of captured salmon to identify Atlantic origin, and monitoring of juvenile salmon populations for evidence of Atlantic salmon or hybrids. The results of these surveys provided some reassurance, but also ongoing uncertainty. Very few Atlantic salmon were detected in spawning surveys in rivers following the escape. This suggested that either the escaped fish died relatively quickly, failed to locate or access spawning habitat, or successfully spawned, but their offspring didn't survive. However, the possibility of low-level persistence couldn't be completely ruled out given the limitations of survey methods. The economic and legal consequences were substantial. Cook Aquaculture faced litigation from environmental groups, tribal nations, and government agencies. The company eventually paid penalties and agreed to remove its net pen operations from Washington state waters. The state legislature passed laws banning Atlantic salmon farming in state waters, effectively ending the industry in Washington, though existing operations elsewhere in the Pacific Northwest continued under increased scrutiny. The economic losses extended beyond the company. The escaped fish represented millions of dollars in lost product that was near harvest. The damage to infrastructure required expensive replacement. Legal costs, penalties, and settlement payments added substantial additional expenses. The broader economic impacts on Washington's fishing industry, tourism, and environmental values were difficult to quantify, but potentially significant. The incident prompted broader reconsideration of open-water net pen aquaculture practices and policies. Critics argued the escape demonstrated that net pen technology was inherently risky and that farming non-native species in open waters created unacceptable ecological hazards. They advocated for land-based closed containment systems that could prevent escapes and contain waste products, or for ending salmon farming entirely in Pacific waters. The aquaculture industry responded that the Cypress Island failure was an isolated incident resulting from specific circumstances, and that improved engineering, maintenance, and regulatory oversight could prevent future failures. They argued that aquaculture provided important economic benefits and food production capacity that shouldn't be eliminated due to single incidents, however serious. The environmental and conservation community was divided. Some groups called for complete bans on non-native species aquaculture in open waters. Others advocated for transitioning to land-based systems or to farming native Pacific salmon species rather than Atlantic salmon. Still others focused on improving regulations and enforcement for existing operations while acknowledging aquaculture's potential role in sustainable food production. From a broader perspective, the incident highlighted tensions inherent in marine aquaculture. The open water net pen approach offers economic efficiencies by leveraging natural processes for water exchange and waste assimilation. However, it creates environmental connections that can become pathways for escapes, disease transmission, and ecosystem effects. Land-based closed systems eliminate these environmental connections, but at substantially higher capital and operating costs that affect economic viability. The choice between these approaches involves trade-offs between economic efficiency, environmental risk, regulatory complexity, and food production goals. Different jurisdictions have made different choices based on their particular ecological conditions, economic priorities, regulatory capacities, and cultural values regarding environmental protection and resource use. The Atlantic salmon escape also illustrated challenges in managing risks associated with technological systems operating in natural environments. Net pen facilities must function reliably despite exposure to forces, storms, currents, biofouling, structural fatigue, that can cause failures even in well-designed systems. The probability of catastrophic failure might be low in any given year, but over time and across multiple facilities, the cumulative risk becomes significant. Similar patterns appear in other contexts where technological systems interface with natural environments. Oil and gas infrastructure faces risks of spills despite safety systems. Hydroelectric dams face risks of failure despite engineering safeguards. The question becomes not whether systems are perfectly safe. Perfect safety is impossible, but whether the risks are acceptable given the benefits, and whether adequate safeguards and response capabilities exist to manage consequences when failures occur. For the 260,000 Atlantic salmon released into Puget Sound, their fate represents an uncontrolled experiment in species introduction. Most probably died relatively quickly, unable to adapt to natural conditions after a lifetime in captivity. Some likely survived longer, potentially competing with native fish and contributing to ecosystem disruption. Whether any successfully reproduced remains uncertain, though the lack of evidence for established populations provides hope that the introduction didn't create permanent changes to Pacific salmon communities. The incident's legacy extends beyond the immediate ecological and economic consequences. It changed policy in Washington state, effectively ending Atlantic salmon net pen farming. It influenced debates about aquaculture practices throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. It demonstrated both the vulnerabilities of open water net pen systems and the difficulties of responding to large-scale escape events. and it highlighted the ongoing tensions between food production needs, economic interests, environmental protection, and risk management in contexts where simple answers don't exist, and every approach involves difficult trade-offs. If you love our fishing documentaries, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and comment which country you are watching this video from to support our work and bring you more amazing videos.